The poor are always losing out to the rich. But would you believe that the poor suffered worse inflation on food products than the rich? That we actually have inequality in food inflation? That rich people had to pay less food inflation than the poor? Well, this is the case according to some new research from the Institute of Fiscal Studies. Already, inflation on food and drink between 2021 and 2023 was much higher than the general level of inflation. Overall, inflation for this 2-year period was 15.7%, but inflation on food and non-alcoholic drinks was 28.4%. So the first way in which the poor suffer more from this inflation in essential food purchases is that they spend a higher proportion of their income on food. The poorest 20% of households spend 14.8% of their income on food, whereas the richest 20% of households spend only 9.2% of their income on food. So the poor were disproportionately hit by food inflation and the cost of living crisis. However, this is not the inequality that the IFS identified. Of course, the inflation figures are averages based on a basket of typical goods. The actual inflation that any of us actually incur is determined by the composition of our own individual food baskets. The IFS looked at the typical food purchases of poorer and richer people. They found that for the 10% least expensive versions of food products, the own brand or lower quality versions of key food products, inflation was 36.2%, significantly higher than average food inflation of 28.4%. For the most expensive food products, the premium and higher quality products, food inflation was only 15.8%, much lower than the average 28%. The IFS called this cheapflation. People love coming up with new jargon. So what's going on here? Is there an economic explanation for this? Is there greedflation at the expense of the poor? Were the supermarkets targeting the poor with their price increases? Well, I think the answer to this is no. I think it's likely that the margin, the rate of profit on the own brand lower quality products is much lower than it is for the high quality products. This is simple price elasticity. People that buy premium products are typically much less price sensitive than those that buy lower quality products. The Competition and Markets Authority looked at whether insufficient competition between supermarkets allowed them to charge excessive prices during this period of inflation. They concluded that the high price inflation for groceries doesn't appear to have been driven by ineffective competition between retailers. They found that profitability for the supermarkets was between 2 and 3% between 2020 and 2023, compared with 4.4% 10 years earlier. These are certainly not excessive rates. So in normal times, I think it's likely that the supermarket's premium products were priced with much higher margins than these rates, while the cheap, own brand, lower quality products were priced with small margins, perhaps even loss-making in some cases. So when the inflation shock occurred, the supermarkets had to increase their prices to maintain profitability, and it would seem that they focused on increasing the price of the low margin products, while accepting a reduction in the margins on the premium priced products. So I don't think that the supermarkets were deliberately targeting poor people, but their actions did have the effect of targeting the poor and letting the rich off lightly. It could have been different, for example, if they'd spread the inflation out more evenly on all of their products. This stark disparity in food inflation underscores a profound and often overlooked dimension of economic inequality. The burden of rising prices isn't evenly distributed. It falls heaviest on those who can least afford it. The poorest households, already spending a higher proportion of their income on food, also face the steepest price increases for the low-cost items they rely on. Meanwhile, wealthier households able to choose premium products were somewhat shielded from the worst of food inflation. This indicates that inflation isn't a neutral economic force affecting everyone equally. Instead, it amplifies existing inequalities. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.